Welcome back to CKLA Chats. I am DLC Foster-Yankey, and in this video, we'll be chatting about Lesson 7 in the Midsummer Night's Dream unit, and it is all about monologue, dialogue, and soliloquy. Right, so this lesson is divided into 6 subcomponents that make up the 90-minute ELA block, and we'll talk more about each of those in depth throughout the video. So the first subcomponent is a review of the take home from the previous day's lesson for 15 minutes. Students are invited to share their pictures and collages of the workmen and upper class Athenians with a partner, and the class comes back together and discusses what the pictures selected for each character group have in common. If there's a bulletin board available, the teacher can copy or take photos of the student's work and post them with characters labeled. Next, they move on to playing the tossing lines game again for 10 minutes. Students are told that they are going to read and act out another excerpt from the play that covers the material they read in summary form in Lesson 6 and goes a little further into the story. To prepare, they will toss lines just like they did in Lesson 3. The lines on the screen here are distributed to students, and the teacher answers any questions they may have about pronunciation. Students form a circle to toss the ball around. Before they toss it, they should make eye contact with a classmate to whom they are tossing it, say his or her name, and call out their line. So they proceed to do so, and the teacher ensures that every student has a chance to say his or her line and toss the ball. Alternately, the teacher can divide the class into 3 or 4 line tossing groups that will toss lines simultaneously using fewer lines because it's quicker. Another option, if classroom management doesn't allow for ball tossing, is to have students call out a name, make eye contact, and point to the person to whom they toss the line. Finally, the class can play several rounds during which the teacher calls out the style, such as robot voice, big voice, soft voice, etc. Right. After all the lines have been tossed at least once, the teacher reviews the rhythm of iambic pentameter by clapping and getting the students to clap along, then chanting together, ta-tum, 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 ta-tum. Then they say the line, the course of love never did run smooth in iambic pentameter. Each student says the line he or she just tossed by stomping and emphasizing iambic pentameter. The teacher asks if most of the lines are in iambic pentameter and if students think the scene will be in verse or prose. The class can do another round of tossing lines, emphasizing iambic pentameter. The teacher reminds students that in addition to practicing their iambic pentameter, they are warming up the important acting skill of paying attention to fellow actors. When the game is over, students turn to activity page 7.1, where they will write as many lines from the tossing as they can remember. It does not matter if they have the lines exactly right or if they only remember a few words. They should just get as close as they can. Right. Then they move on to the next component, reading excerpts of Act 2, Scene 1A for 25 minutes. Students turn to the start of Act 2, Scene 1 in their readers, and the teacher poses the discussion questions on the screen here. Okay. Next, the teacher explains what monologue, dialogue, and soliloquy are and writes the definitions on the board. Students copy these definitions onto the literary vocabulary page of their activity books. Students are told that as they read this section of Act 2, Scene 1, they should look for one example of dialogue, one of monologue, and one soliloquy. Once they've found one of each kind of speech, they should write the correct label next to each example. As a check for understanding, the teacher asks students to tell the difference between dialogue, monologue, and soliloquy. Students should also underline any words or phrases they do not understand. Once students are fully oriented to the script, they do a popcorn read, with each student reading a sentence, stopping at the end, every end punctuation mark, including periods, question marks, and exclamation points. So, not necessarily the end of the line. They aren't to worry about acting, pronunciation, or understanding every word. And once they have completed reading that, the teacher will pose a discussion question. They'll continue reading pages 34 and 36, and the teacher will pose another discussion question. And this is where they are looking for that example of monologue, dialogue, or soliloquy. So, in the exchange that they read on these two pages, which one is it? And students will label that in their reader. Okay, they'll continue the same way with pages 36 and 38, and the teacher posing some additional discussion questions, one of which is which type of speech is it, monologue, dialogue, or soliloquy in this section. Okay, moving on to pages 38 and 40. And again, the teacher has students label this speech and explain how they know what kind of speech it is. So, is it dialogue, monologue, or soliloquy? And how do you know? Okay. Next, they'll move on to Shakespeare's language component for 15 minutes. Students will turn to activity page, I think that's 7.2 or 3. And the teacher explains that they're going to look at the scene in short sections and make sure they understand exactly what is going on. So they're looking at chunks of the text and deciphering who is speaking, to whom they are speaking, who or what the character is speaking about, and also looking for words and phrases they don't understand and whether they can define them in context. In addition, they'll also be looking for details that can be eliminated to get to the main idea. And finally, they explain the section in their own words. Okay, so the teacher talks about how the main idea section is new and how when longer passages feel complicated, eliminating some words can be helpful for finding the main idea. So they should cross out extra information very lightly because they still want to be able to read it. They're going to work through the first 2 selections as a class. Then students will complete the last section individually or in pairs. They'll review the answers as a class, and if time remains, students will return to their pairs to work on defining any other words or phrases they have underlined using context or the dictionary, writing the definitions in the margins of their readers. If time runs out, they can check their definitions for homework using a dictionary. Next, they move on to the video interpretation component for 10 minutes. Students are told that they will watch a clip of Act 2, Scene 1, and to pay special attention to movement. Okay, so after they have watched, the teacher asks students if the fairies match their vision and what they think is the same and what is different. After playing the video, students are also given the opportunity to add adjectives to their Oberon Titania character organizers. They are reminded again about there not being one right interpretation. And as a check for understanding, the teacher circulates and checks students' graphic organizer, if necessary, asking questions to support their descriptions. For example, what did Oberon look like in the scene? And how do you think Titania felt in the scene? Okay. The final component is writing your course smoother for 15 minutes. This is activity page 7.3, so the previous one was 7.2. The class will read the letter together, which I'll read really quickly. Dear course smoother, I have a very busy life as the fairy queen, dancing in the forest in the moonlight with my people. My biggest problem is my relationship with the fairy king, Oberon. He is also good at dancing in the forest, but he is rather bossy and likes to have his own way all the time. Right now, we're in a big fight because he really wants one of my pages to be his follower. But the little boy is the child of a dear friend of mine who died, and I feel responsible for him. This is causing a lot of problems in the forest, and our fairy subjects are being forced to choose sides. I'm also a little nervous that Oberon might try to take revenge. Should I budge from my principles and give over the little boy, or should I be firm and refuse? Signed by Terribly Troubled Titania. So, students write a 1 to 2 paragraph advice letter to her. And once they're done, if time remains, they can share their answers with one another. The teacher can also collect the assignment to review students' writing. Right. And that concludes lesson 7. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.